The ballroom at Harrogate House was the brightest room in London that night, and Isadora Ainsworth, Duchess of Calderhaven, had rarely felt so invisible. 2 years and 4 months. That was how long she had been his wife. 2 years and 4 months of separate bedchambers, of mourning silences across a table long enough to seat 16, of assemblies where she stood on one side of a room and he on the other, both of them pretending that was how marriages were always arranged. She held her champagne as though it were the only thing keeping her upright, and watched her husband across the length of the ballroom without appearing to watch him. Lord Caspian Ainsworth stood near the gilt mirrors with 3 gentlemen from the Admiralty, one hand resting loosely at his side, the other holding a glass he had not yet lifted to his mouth. He was beautiful in the cold way all the Ainsworth men were beautiful. Tall, dark-haired, gray-eyed, a face like something carved for the tomb of a prince. When he wanted to, he could empty a room of warmth by walking into it. He had been emptying rooms of warmth, she sometimes thought, for the whole of his adult life. He had not looked at her once since the footman announced them. "You will wear a hole through him if you stare much longer," murmured a voice at her elbow. "I am not staring." "No, of course not." Ambrose Lindgate had the easy humor of a man who had never been married, and the protective sharpness of a man who had watched his only sister marry a stranger. "You are merely calculating the angle at which to strike. Do inform me when. I should like to have a wager." "Ambrose." "I'm serious. You are my only sister. I reserve the right to be tiresome in as many public rooms as possible." She almost smiled. It had been a long time since she had almost smiled at anything, and she did not trust the sensation when it came. Across the room, a commotion began near the east doors. A breath of perfume reached her first, gardenia, and something darker beneath it, and Isadora did not need to turn to know who had arrived. All of London had been waiting for her. All of London, she suspected, had been invited for this very purpose. "Oh," Ambrose said quietly. "She came. Of course she came." Lady Cressida Vale moved through the crowd, the way a swan moves through a pond, parting lesser creatures without touching them. She wore black, as she had worn in public every evening since her husband's death 3 winters ago, but the black was cut so low across her shoulders and rendered in silk so fine that it mocked the mourning it pretended to be. Her hair was the color of wheat at dusk. Her throat was bare. At the hollow of her collarbone she wore a small, old gold locket that Isadora had never seen, and somehow did not need to be told had once been given to someone she ought to have known. Ambrose set down his glass. "Shall I fetch him?" "No." "Isadora." I said no. She did not recognize the sound of her own voice. Level. Calm. "If she wants a scene, she will have one, whether we invite it or not. Let her walk to us. Let all of London watch her walk to us." Caspian had seen her now. Isadora watched his profile, watched the exact moment the stillness came into him that always came when he was refusing, second by second, to feel. He did not move. He did not turn. He waited. Cressida did not go to him. She came across the ballroom in a slow, deliberate line, silk whispering against the polished floor, and the crowd parted around her, the way water parts around a knife, and she did not once take her eyes from Isadora. She stopped 3 feet away. She smiled. She smiled, as if she had waited years for the pleasure of it. "Your Grace," she said, loud enough for the nearest dozen guests to hear every syllable. "Choose her or me, tonight, before all of London." A fan snapped shut somewhere near the window. No one else in the room so much as breathed. For a breath, nothing in the ballroom moved. A violin held a note too long. A servant at the far door froze with a tray of glasses half lifted. Isadora felt her own pulse in her fingertips and thought, with great and terrible clarity, that whatever her husband did in the next 10 seconds would decide the shape of the rest of her life. Caspian set his glass on the nearest tray. He crossed the length of the ballroom without haste. He did not look at Cressida Vale. He walked past her as though she were a pillar and stopped in front of his wife and offered his arm with the perfectly correct degree of formality he would have shown an archduchess. "Madam," he said, "I believe this next dance is mine." The musicians, who had been about to begin a minuet, were staring. So was half of London. Isadora laid her gloved hand on his sleeve because she did not know what else to do, and he turned her into the opening step of a waltz the orchestra had not yet begun to play. A beat of horrified silence, then a violin, hastily, then the rest. She heard herself breathing. "Smile," he said under the music. "I beg your pardon?" "Smile, Isadora. Or at least, do not look as if you mean to strike me. We are being watched by 140 people. You counted. I always count." She smiled. Then, because she had been raised to it, and because she was furious, and because for the first time in the whole of their marriage, her husband had used her given name without a servant between them to hand it down. He did not speak again until the dance ended. Then he took her hand firmly, in full view of the ballroom, led her through the double doors, and down the stairs, and into their carriage. And the door had not yet shut before the shouting began outside. 1,000 voices at once. "Do not," he said. "You walked past her." "Yes." "You walked past her as though she did not exist." "Yes." "She will never forgive that. I am counting on that." He was not looking at her. He was looking out the carriage window at the house they were leaving, at the lit windows behind which 140 people were already sharpening what they would say in tomorrow's letters. She will do it now. Whatever she meant to do in a week, she will do by Friday, which means we have until Friday to be out of London. We, you and I, together, by dawn. Caspian. He turned. He looked at her for the first time that evening. She had forgotten, in 2 years and 4 months, how gray his eyes were. Not the cold gray she remembered, a colder gray, the gray of something that had been a long time underwater. "I will explain at Calderhaven," he said. "I will explain everything at Calderhaven, but I am asking you to come. Not as my wife, not as a duchess, as a woman whose brother is about to be ruined if we do not leave this city at first light." Her mouth opened. Ambrose. Of course. He had known she would say no for herself. He had known she would not say no for Ambrose. "You are cruel," she said softly. "I am efficient." "That is not the same thing." "No." His voice was so quiet she almost missed it. "It is not." They traveled north for 3 days, in near silence, changing horses at inns, where the landlords knew his face and did not ask, taking their meals in small, separate parlors, sleeping in neighboring bedchambers. They exchanged perhaps 40 words in 3 days, none of them about what she was being asked to do. The carriage reached Calderhaven House just before 2 in the morning, and the wing she had lived in for the whole of her marriage was dark and cold, and half the chambers had been shut for winter. The housekeeper apologized. The dowager's wing was also closed. There was only the east corridor kept open against the frost, with the Duke's rooms and the Duchess's dressing room, and a door between them that had been locked for so long, Isadora had forgotten it was a door at all. She did not sleep that first night. She sat in the green chair by the bedroom fire in the east corridor of Calderhaven House, wrapped in the traveling cloak she had not taken off, and she stared at the door. Not the door to the hallway. The other door. It was set into the paneling between her dressing room and his bedchamber, painted the same cream as the walls, so that when she had taken possession of this house as its mistress 2 years and 4 months ago, she had genuinely not noticed it for the first week. By the time she had noticed it, she had also noticed that her husband never used it. and so she had stopped noticing it again, and the little brass key had been taken down by the housekeeper and put in a drawer in the steward's office, and that had been that. The key was on the mantelpiece now. The housekeeper had left it there with her candle and her apology, and had closed the door behind her, and Isadora had been staring at it ever since. She had no intention of using it. She had no intention of letting him use it. She was simply keeping watch. The way one keeps watch over a sleeping animal one did not fully trust. When at last she went down in the morning, she found him already at the breakfast room. He rose when she came in. He had never risen for her, except on the day of their wedding. He pulled out her chair himself, because there were no footmen in the morning room this quarter, and he asked her in perfectly even tones whether she preferred coffee or chocolate. "Coffee," she said. "I did not know." "No," she said. "You did not." He poured it for her. He did it badly, as men do, and she watched his hand on the silver handle and thought how strange it was to watch him do a small, ordinary, domestic thing for the first time in the whole of their marriage. "Isadora, please do not." "I have to." "I know you have to," she said, and picked up her cup. "I know that is why we are here. I only ask that you give me until the afternoon before you begin to use me." He was quiet. "Is that how it has felt?" he said. "These 2 years and 4 months. It is how it was always going to feel. I knew what I was marrying." "Did you?" "I thought I did." He set down his own cup. She did not look up. "I did not go to her that night," he said. Quietly. Evenly. Like a man laying down a weapon on a table between them. "I will say it once, because you asked once, and I did not answer. And I have regretted that silence more than I have regretted anything in my life. I did not go to her on our wedding night. I was sent for on a matter concerning a man whose name I had given my word never to speak. It has taken me 2 years and 4 months to be released from that word. I am released now. I can tell you the whole of it when you are willing to hear it. I am not asking for tonight." She did not move. She did not drink. She looked at the coffee in her cup, and she felt, for the first time in 2 years and 4 months, a small, terrible, treacherous crack open inside her chest. "Stop," she said. "Isadora." I said stop. Her voice was not steady anymore. "You don't get to do this now. You don't get to hand me the truth on the morning she comes for you with a knife and expect me to believe it is because of me. You don't get to love me on her schedule." He closed his eyes. "No," he said. "You are right. I do not." And he stood, and he bowed, precisely, the way he had bowed the day they were introduced in her father's drawing room. And he left the breakfast room, and she sat alone in a house that had never felt like hers until that moment, when it suddenly, irrevocably, did. On the sideboard, half hidden beneath a folded napkin, someone had laid a letter. It was addressed in a hand she had never seen before, to Her Grace, the Duchess of Calderhaven, and it had been sealed, in red wax, with the crest of Lady Cressida Vale. She did not open the letter at once. She set it down on the dressing table in her rooms, and she looked at it for a long time. And then she rang for her maid and asked for her writing habit, because she had discovered in 2 years and 4 months of her marriage that there were certain decisions she could not make inside a house. The park at Calderhaven was 1,000 acres of oak and frost, and she had ridden it only twice before, each time in company, each time in the first spring of her marriage, when she had still believed something might be made of it. The frost crackled under the mare's hooves. Her breath went white. Above her, in the bare upper branches of an oak she did not know the name of, a single rook watched her pass and did not rise. She rode until the house was out of sight behind her, and then she pulled up beside a stone wall she had never reached before and sat very still in the saddle and let herself shake. She shook for perhaps 2 full minutes. She counted. She had discovered, over 2 years and 4 months of her marriage, that counting was a serviceable way of weathering things one could not name. Then she straightened her spine and looked at the landscape as if it were a thing she owned, which it was, by law, if not by welcome. The wall was old stone, mossed at the base, capped with snow. Beyond it, the ground sloped down toward a frozen stream, and beyond the stream, there was a wood she had never ridden into. Somewhere in that wood, she supposed, was the chapel where her husband's younger brother lay buried, the chapel she had never once asked to be shown. The mistress had written to her. The mistress had written to her in the same hour that her carriage had arrived, which meant the mistress had known she would arrive, which meant the mistress had people in this house, and probably in London, and probably in places Isadora had not thought to look. That was one thing. The other thing was that Caspian had, this morning in the breakfast room, tried to tell her the truth. And she had stopped him. She did not know which of the two facts frightened her more. She had not heard the second horse until it was almost beside her. She turned, and there he was, bareheaded in the cold, on the black gelding she knew was his favorite. And she realized with a quiet shock that she had never seen her husband on horseback in 2 years and 4 months. "You ride out alone," he said. "I did not wish company. You should not ride out alone. Not this week. I am aware. Isadora, do you mean to follow me every time I leave the house? Because that would be a new kind of marriage for us, and I am not certain I have the strength for another new kind." He was silent. The gelding shifted its weight. Somewhere far off, a crow called, and was answered by a second crow, and then by a third. She had not known before that crows counted themselves. "There are men in the village," he said at last, "that I don't know by face. 4 of them arrived in the last 2 days. The innkeeper at the 3 Crowns sent word this morning. 2 of them asked yesterday evening, over ale, whether it was true that the Duke was in residence and whether the Duchess was with him. The innkeeper said he did not know. They paid him with a coin he says came from a London mint. I should have told you before you rode out. I did not, because I did not know whether you would believe me, and I did not wish to find out." She looked at him. "You believe they are hers. I believe she is not fastidious in her instruments. You believe they are hers." "Yes." She sat with that for a moment. Then she turned the mare's head and walked her quietly back toward the house, and he fell in beside her without asking, and they rode the whole long length of the park without speaking, and 3 times she opened her mouth to ask him what the letter contained, because surely he knew, and 3 times she closed it again, because she was not yet ready to let him see her need to know. They came out of the avenue of lime trees at a slow walk. She saw the house ahead of her, as if for the first time, its pale stone front a little softened by winter, its windows lit in 2 places, only on the ground floor, the rest of it shut against the cold. It was her house. It had been her house for the whole of her marriage, and she had never thought of it as hers. In the stable yard, he dismounted first and held her horse while she got down, and when her foot slipped on the frozen cobbles, his hand went to her waist with the swift, impersonal steadiness of a man catching any falling thing, and he let go the instant she was on her feet. It was, she thought, the first time he had touched her since the waltz. It was, if she counted honestly, the second time he had touched her at all in 2 years and 4 months. She walked into the house and up the stairs and into her dressing room, and she closed the door behind her, and she stood for a long moment with her hand on the brass of the door handle, and then she crossed to the dressing table and she opened the letter. It contained 1 sheet of paper and 1 small folded note in a child's handwriting. The sheet of paper said, If your Grace wishes to understand what her husband has been, she has only to ask him about the name on the enclosed. I remain your sister in this matter, C.V. The folded note was addressed, in a round, careful, 5-year-old script, to Papa. She did not cry. She sat on the edge of her bed, with the note unopened in her hand, for what felt like a very long time. And she did not cry, because crying was something she had allowed herself exactly 3 times in 2 years and 4 months of marriage. And she had sworn after the 3rd not to spend another tear on Caspian Ainsworth until she knew for certain what he was. She unfolded the note. It said only, "Papa, please come." I was sick again. Mama said you would not come, but I said you would. Theo. She read it twice, then 3 times. Then she folded it exactly as it had been folded, and she put it inside the sealed letter, and she put the sealed letter inside the drawer of the writing desk, and she locked the drawer, and she put the key in the pocket of her gown. She thought quite clearly that it was the handwriting that undid her. A child had sat at a table somewhere and had been taught, letter by letter, how to write the word Papa. And someone who loved him had praised each attempt, and someone had folded the finished note and put it in an envelope. That child existed. That child had been sick again. That child had expected, against the counsel of the only mother he had, that a man he called Papa would come. Then she went downstairs, and she found her husband in the library. He rose when she came in. He had been sitting at the long table with 3 stacks of correspondence and a glass of something amber he had not yet drunk, and he rose the moment the door opened, and she thought, distantly, how very good he had become at rising. "Tell me about the child," she said. He did not ask which child. He did not ask how she knew. He did not reach for the glass. He stood quite still behind the table, with one hand flat upon it, and he looked at her across that small lit room, and for the first time since their wedding day, she saw her husband visibly afraid. "Sit down," he said. "I prefer to stand. Isadora, please, sit down." She sat. He did not. "His name is Theodore," he said. "He's 5 years old this past autumn. He's not mine." She waited. "He is my brother's." The fire popped. She felt the word in her chest the way a woman feels a stare missed in the dark. "Your brother is dead." "Yes." "Your brother was unmarried." "Yes." "Your brother was 18 years old when he died." 17. She put her hand on the arm of the chair, because the chair was the only fixed thing in the room. "His name was Edmund," Caspian said very quietly. "He was 9 years younger than I am. Our mother died bearing him. He was the only person in this house I ever managed to love without reservation, and I loved him badly, because I was a boy of 6 and 20 when he was 17, and I thought I knew what he needed, and I was wrong. Cressida was 4 and 20 when he was 17. She was newly married. Her husband was 62. She was unhappy. My brother was a boy who had been told, all his short life, that he could have whatever he wanted. And he wanted her. And he wanted her recklessly. And when she told him she was with child, he wrote to me the night before he drowned and asked me to see to it. Those were his words. To see to it. Caspian. I saw to it, Isadora. I have been seeing to it for 5 years. The child is at a house in Richmond, with a woman I trust, a woman named Mistress Greer, who nursed my mother and then my brother, and has outlived both of them. His mother visits when she chooses, which is seldom, and the boy has learned, in the quiet, resourceful way of children, not to expect her. I pay for the house, the woman, the physician, the boy's lessons, the boy's clothes, the boy's every small illness. I gave my brother my word. The only word I ever gave him in his life that I could keep after he was gone. That the child would never know he was a bastard and would never know his father's name. That is the word I have been bound by. That is the word I could not tell you. That is what I was sent for on our wedding night, when the midwife in Richmond sent word that the boy had fallen into a fever. And I went because his mother would not go. And I came home at dawn and found you with your face already set against me. And I understood, in one look, that you had been told some version of the thing, and I could not contradict the version without speaking the name of a boy in a grave. She could not speak. She told you he was mine. She implied it. She has implied it to half of London for the whole of our marriage. She has never said it outright, because the moment she says it outright, I can prove that she lies. She lives on the implication. She lives on the fact that I will not publicly contradict her, because to contradict her is to name the child's true father. And his true father is a 17-year-old boy in a grave at Calderhaven Chapel. And I will not do that to my brother, and I will not do that to the child. So she has had, all this time, the freedom to walk through every drawing room in London with my name in her mouth, and I have had the freedom to say nothing, and you have had the freedom to believe the worst of me, because I gave you no reason to believe anything else. Caspian, I am not finished. He came around the table then, and she saw that his hand, the one that had been flat against it, was shaking. She wrote to you this morning because she knows that I am finally released. Mistress Greer wrote to me last week. The child has been asking. The child has been ill, truly ill, 3 times this autumn, the last time badly. The child is old enough now to ask questions the woman cannot answer. My brother's instruction was that I should keep the secret until the child could choose for himself whether to know. The child is choosing, Isadora. He is choosing, and I have to go to him. And the moment I go to him, Cressida will understand that the leash is off, and she will go to the papers, and she will say the thing she has never quite said, and she will be believed by every person in London who does not love me, which is every person in London who does not love me. The last sentence he said very softly. He said it the way a man says a thing he has rehearsed at night in the dark for a long time. She stood up. She crossed the distance between them, and she put her hand, flat, against the front of his coat, over the place where his heart was, and she held it there. "Why did you not tell me?" she said. "Because I had given my word." "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I had given my word, Isadora." "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I thought," he said, and his voice broke for the first time in the whole of her knowledge of him, "that if I told you, you would leave me, and I was not yet ready to be left." She did not take her hand away. She did not take her hand away, but she did not move closer either. And they stood like that for a long moment in the library of Calderhaven House, a man who had said a thing he had sworn never to say, and a woman who did not know yet whether she was going to forgive him for the saying or for the long silence before it. Then she took her hand away, because if she had not taken it away, she would have done something she was not yet ready to do. "Caspian." "Yes." "I need to think." "Yes." "I need to think somewhere that is not this room." "Yes." She walked out. She walked out slowly because she did not want him to believe she was fleeing, and she closed the door behind her, and then she stood in the cold flagstone corridor outside the library and pressed her forehead against the wall because her knees would not hold her. She loved him. She had not known it until the moment her hand had been on his coat, and now that she knew it, she could not now forget it, and she did not know what she was going to do with it. She had married him because her father had arranged it, and she had admired him because he was admirable, and she had hated him by the 6th month because he had given her nothing to admire, and she had stopped hating him at some point in the second winter because hatred took more energy than she had, and she had believed herself, through the whole long, slow gray of the second year, to be simply a woman who had made a bad bargain and would live out the rest of her life as the mistress of a great cold house. She had not expected to discover, at 4:30, on a Wednesday afternoon in November, that the man she had married had, in the whole of that time, been keeping the house of a dying brother's orphaned child, and had been letting an entire city believe him an adulterer in order to keep a promise to a boy in a grave. She had not expected to discover that she loved him for it. She was still standing in the corridor when she heard the front bell. It was not the soft bell of a village caller. It was the hard iron bell that only sounded when the gate was being opened for a carriage. She turned her head. She heard the butler cross the hall. She heard the great front door open. She heard a woman's voice, clear as a struck glass, say, "Announce me." And Isadora Ainsworth, Duchess of Calderhaven, straightened her shoulders and smoothed her skirt and walked, not slowly, not quickly, exactly as her mother had taught her to walk, down the long flagstone corridor to meet Lady Cressida Vale in her own hall. Cressida was unwrapping her furs. She was smiling. She turned as Isadora entered the hall, with the slow, theatrical grace of a woman who had practiced this turn in a mirror that morning. "Your Grace," she said, "I did hope I should be in time. I have come to see the child. The child is not here. No." The smile did not move. "But we could speak of him." "We could not." "Oh, I think we could." Cressida stepped closer. She was half a head taller than Isadora, and she wore, still, the little gold locket. "I think we could speak of him very candidly, you and I, now that your husband has no doubt told you a version of the story. I should hate for you to live the rest of your life on a version." Behind her, at the library door, Caspian had come out. Isadora felt him before she saw him, the way one feels the change of the wind. She did not turn. She did not need to. "Lady Vale," she said, "you are not welcome in this house. Your husband might disagree. My husband has had 2 years and 4 months to disagree with me. He has not. He will not begin today." Cressida's smile flickered. Only for a moment. Isadora saw it. "I came in kindness, Your Grace. You came because you have heard that he is released from his word, and you wish to be the first to know whether he would use his freedom to tell me the truth or to continue the lie. He has told me the truth. He told me the truth an hour ago. You are too late, Lady Vale. I am sorry for you. It is an exhausting way to live, being always a little too late." Behind her, she heard Caspian take a very small breath. Cressida's face did something complicated. For one instant, she looked almost young, almost injured, almost like a woman who had been, in her own way, in love. Then she closed like a door. "You will regret this," she said pleasantly. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But you will regret this, Your Grace. And on the day you do, you will remember I offered you kindness first." "I will remember." "Good." Cressida gathered her furs. She walked, very slowly, to the front door. At the threshold she stopped and half-turned. "Caspian," she said, without looking at him, "there is a letter going to the Morning Chronicle tonight. I cannot call it back. I did not send it today. I sent it on Monday." She left. The great door closed behind her. The butler, who had been standing frozen throughout, bowed and retreated. Isadora did not move. She heard Caspian cross the hall behind her. She felt him stop half a pace away. "Monday," he said quietly. "Yes." "Before we left London." "Yes." "Which means it is in tomorrow's papers," Isadora said, "and there is nothing on earth we can do to stop it. And by this time, Tomorrow, every person in England will believe you have kept a child on me for 5 years." She turned to face him at last. He was very pale. "Caspian," she said, "we have to go to Richmond tonight, before the paper is on any breakfast table in London. We have to bring that boy here before she does." They left Calderhaven House in the dark. Isadora had not packed. She had put on her heaviest traveling cloak and her sturdiest boots, and she had taken the key from the drawer of her writing desk and put the child's note inside the inner pocket of her dress, where no one but herself could reach it. And she had gone down the stairs and into the carriage without a maid and without a word. Caspian was already inside. He had taken the opposite seat, the way he had taken the opposite seat every day of their marriage, and she sat across from him and pulled the fur over her knees and knocked once on the roof, and the carriage began to move. They rode for a long time in the dark. The carriage lamps made a small yellow light against the windows. The horses breathed. The wheels struck ice, struck stone, struck ice again, and the carriage rocked in the slow, measured rhythm of a boat at anchor. Somewhere past midnight, they passed through a village she did not know the name of, and she saw a light in a single upper window, and she thought, with a strange, distant clearness, that every light in every village they would pass tonight was a light in a room belonging to someone who did not yet know the name Caspian Ainsworth, and would know it tomorrow, and would speak of it at breakfast, and would not pity him. They changed horses at a posting inn at a crossroads where the landlord was awake, because he had been told they were coming, and where he handed up a basket of bread and cold chicken and a stone bottle of hot water wrapped in flannel without a word, and touched his hat to them both and sent them on. Isadora had not eaten since morning. She unwrapped a piece of the bread and could not bring herself to take a bite. She put it back. She watched her husband across the dim yellow lamplight and saw that he, too, had not eaten and was not going to. "Isadora." "Yes." "If you do not wish to go to Richmond with me, I will ask the coachman to stop at the next inn. I will send you back with the footman. I wish to go. You wish to go because you are good, and because you are loyal, and because you are a better woman than she has been to me, and I am taking advantage of those qualities to ask you to walk into a house where a child you do not know is going to meet you as his new mother, and I am asking you to do it in one night. Yes." "Yes, what?" "Yes, that is what you are asking. And yes, I will do it." He closed his eyes. She watched him close his eyes. "Why?" he said. "Because he wrote, 'Please come.' Isadora. A child wrote 'Please come,' and he wrote it in a hand that has been taught carefully by a woman who loves him. And he wrote it to a father who has been, by his own account, the only steady thing in his small life. And you cannot now not go. And I cannot not go with you. Because if I do not go with you, Caspian, then you will arrive in Richmond alone, and you will put that child in a carriage alone, and you will bring him back to Calderhaven alone, and by the time you reach Calderhaven, every paper in England will have decided what he is, and he will never, as long as he lives, be anything other than the thing the papers have decided. Whereas, if I go with you, if I am the woman who walks into that house with you at 3 in the morning, if I am the woman who carries him down the stairs and puts him in this carriage and sits beside him while he sleeps, then when the papers say what they say tomorrow, there will be one other story available. And the other story will be the true one, and the true one is that I went." He did not speak for a long time. "You have thought about this. I have thought of nothing else since the hall. Isadora, do not. I was only going to say thank you. Then say it, and then be quiet, because I am very near to crying, and I do not wish to cry in this carriage." Thank you. She turned her face to the window. They rode for another hour in silence. The road climbed and fell. Once the coachman slowed almost to a stop for a flock of sheep crossing unattended, and the bleating of them in the dark was the only sound in the world. Once the carriage bumped over a bridge she did not see, and the sound of running water beneath them startled her out of half-sleep, and she realized she had been watching her husband. He was not looking back at her. He was looking out of his own window at the dark, with his jaw set, and she understood quite suddenly that he was a man going to fetch the last piece of his dead brother from the house of a strange woman, and that he was afraid in a way he had not been afraid in the library, because in the library he had only been afraid of her, and now he was afraid of a small boy in a bed. Caspian. Yes, tell me about him, about Theodore, so that when I walk in, I do not walk in as a stranger. He did not answer at once. Then he said, quietly, he is thin. He takes after his father that way. He has a great seriousness about him that he learned, I think, from being alone too often. He's frightened of dogs and not of horses, which is the wrong way round for a boy. He reads well for his age. He sings very badly, and knows it, and will not, therefore, sing. He has never been told that his uncle is his uncle. He has been told that I am a friend of his father's, who comes when he can. That is the whole of what he knows of me. And you, what does he call you? Uncle. He chose the word himself when he was 3. I did not correct it. It has meant what it has meant. And when we bring him home, then it will mean what it is, which is what it has always been. I am his uncle. I have always been his uncle. I have only been prevented from saying so. She nodded, slowly, in the dark. Caspian. Yes. I do not know how to be a mother, to a child who is not mine. Who has another mother? Who has been ill? No one knows how, Isadora. One does it anyway. She did not answer. She watched the dark fields pass. Somewhere past 3 in the morning, the carriage stopped at a small, neat house on the Richmond Road, with ivy on the gate-post and a single lamp burning at the door. And the woman who opened the door was gray-headed and small and had clearly been waiting. And she took one look at Isadora, and her face did something that Isadora did not know how to read until much later, which was relief. Your Grace, the woman said, and curtsied deeply. He has been asking for his father since Tuesday. Come in, both of you. Come in quickly. He is awake. He was a thin, dark-haired child, with his uncle's gray eyes and his dead father's mouth, and he was sitting up in a white bed in a small white room at the top of the house, with a book open across his knees. And when he saw Caspian in the doorway, he did not cry, and he did not call out. He only set the book aside, very carefully, on the quilt, and folded his hands in his lap, and waited. Caspian crossed the room in 3 strides, and sat down on the edge of the bed, and gathered the boy against him without a word. The child's arms went around his neck. The child did not make a sound. Isadora stood in the doorway, and put one hand on the frame, and watched her husband hold a child he had not been permitted to call his, and she understood, at last, the shape of the man she had married. The boy spoke first. His voice was small and careful. You did come. I came. Mama said you would not. I know what Mama said. She was wrong. I will always come. Theodore, look at me. The boy looked. I'm going to take you home tonight, to the house you have heard me speak of, to Calderhaven. Do you remember what I have told you about Calderhaven? There is a pond. There is a pond, and a horse that is old. She is older now. She will like you. Is it my home? Yes. The boy did not say anything for a moment. He looked past Caspian, through the doorway, and he saw Isadora for the first time. He did not flinch. He looked at her, the long, grave, considering way certain children look at adults when they have been ill a long time and have learned to judge the people around them quickly. "Who is she?" he said. "This is Isadora. She is my wife." "The Duchess?" "Yes." "Mama said the Duchess would not want me." Isadora crossed the room before she knew she had decided to. She knelt at the side of the bed. She did not touch him, because she knew, somehow, that he would not yet permit it. She only put her hand on the quilt, near his foot, and she said, quite steadily, "Your mama was wrong about that too, Theodore. I want you to come home with us tonight. I have a room that will be yours, all the way at the south end of the house, with a window that looks out over the lawn to a pond with reeds along the edge. And in the summer there are ducks in it. And if you like ducks, we shall sit in the window and watch them. I have been thinking on the way here of the color of the curtains, and I think they should be green, because I have always thought green is a good color for a boy's room. But if you prefer blue, we shall have blue. Will you come?" He looked at her a long moment. Then he looked at Caspian. Then at her again. "Are you my mama now?" She felt the question go through her, the way a needle goes through linen. "No," she said gently. "Your mama is your mama, and you will see her when she wishes. But I should like to be the person who is in the house when you are in the house. If you would like that." "Yes." "Good." "Your Grace." "Yes. I'm sorry you had to come in the night." She did not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry. She laid her hand, very briefly, on the top of his small, dark head, and she said, "I am not sorry, Theodore. I am glad." He let her help him into his coat. He had very few belongings. A small wooden horse on a string, a copy of a storybook with a broken spine, a green ribbon he had been wearing around his wrist, which Caspian tied for him in a careful small bow and told him he might keep until he was safe home. When Mistress Greer bent to kiss him farewell, he put both his arms around her neck and held her for a long moment without speaking, and Isadora looked away because she did not have the right to watch. They reached Calderhaven just after dawn, with a sleeping child on Caspian's lap and the Morning Chronicle already on every breakfast table in England. The butler met them at the door with a face like wax. "Your Grace." "Yes." "The papers have come." "Yes. It is bad. I know. Take this, please." Caspian lifted the boy into the butler's arms. The butler, who had not held a child in 30 years, held him with the perfect mute competence of a man who had served 3 dukes. "This is Master Theodore. He is to have the south-facing room at the end of the nursery corridor. Mistress Halloran is to be sent for from the village. She nursed my brother, and she will nurse him. Have a fire lit. Have milk brought. Send for the physician at Ashford. The child is not to be woken. When he wakes, he is to be told that he is home. Yes, Your Grace. One more thing. Your Grace. From this hour, he is Theodore Ainsworth. He is my ward. He is the son of my late brother. That is the only version of his history that is to be spoken in this house, or any house I own. I will write the legal instrument this morning, and it will be signed by me and witnessed by the parson before the noon bell. Is that clear?" "Perfectly, Your Grace." "Thank you." The butler carried the boy up the stairs. Isadora stood in the cold flagstone hall and watched the small, sleeping head disappear around the turn of the landing. And she thought, distantly, that she had never in her life seen a house change its meaning so quickly. Caspian picked up the paper from the side table. He read it. She watched him read it. She watched his face go very still, and then very gray, and then perfectly composed. "Tell me," she said, "you do not want to read it." "Tell me." "It is the version we expected." She has not named the child, but she has named me, and she has said that for 5 years I have maintained a household outside London in which I have kept a son whose mother is not my wife. She has said that my wife has known. She has said that my wife has been silent out of shame. She has said that now that the child is of an age to be seen in public, I have brought him to Calderhaven to be raised openly, and that this is proof of a long cruelty I have done to a woman who had no part in the arrangement. She has, at the end of the piece, named 3 additional ladies of my acquaintance by implication, none of whom deserve it, and she has suggested that any person wishing to understand the true measure of the Duke of Calderhaven should have only to ask them. She has said all that before breakfast. She has said all that before breakfast. Mistress Halloran arrived from the village within the hour, a broad, silent, gray-eyed woman of 50, with her sleeves already turned back, and she went up the stairs to the south nursery corridor without being asked, and the house began to make small, reassuring sounds of itself. A kettle, a fire being laid, a voice saying softly to a sleeping child that he was to have milk when he woke, and a clean shirt, and anything else on earth he could think of. Caspian wrote the legal instrument at his desk in a quarter of an hour. Isidora stood at the window while he wrote, and when he had done, he read it aloud to her once, and she said only, "Yes." And he signed it, and set it aside for the parson to witness at 11. The parson came at 11, a small, anxious man who had christened Caspian's brother and had not expected ever to witness a document legitimizing his memory. He signed with an unsteady hand and went home, and Isidora thought he would be telling a version of what he had witnessed to every parishioner within a 3-mile ride by Sunday, and that was also a kind of defense, and she was grateful for it. Before she went up to change for London, she climbed the stairs to the south nursery corridor and stopped at the door of the child's room. The door stood ajar. Mistress Halloran sat beside the bed with a piece of plain sewing in her lap. The lamp turned low, and Theodore was asleep on his side, with the green ribbon still on his wrist, where Caspian had tied it at Richmond. Isidora did not cross into the room. She stood there for perhaps half a minute and thought that whatever the paper tomorrow said, the fact of this child asleep under a ribbon was a truer thing than any line of print London could set against them. Caspian? Yes. I'm going to London. He looked at her. She had never, she thought, seen him look at her quite like that before, as though she were a window that had opened unexpectedly in a room he had long believed to be sealed. Isidora. I am going to London, and I am going today, and I am going in my own carriage, with my own arms on the panels, and I am going to the house of my aunt on Berkeley Square, whom you have always disliked, and who has always disliked you, and I am going to sit in her drawing room at 4 in the afternoon when she receives her callers, and I am going to say to every woman who comes through her door that my husband has spent the last 5 years raising his dead brother's orphan child as a matter of sacred trust, and that I have known it for some time, and that I am proud of it, and that any person who prints otherwise will answer to the Duke of Calderhaven, and, more immediately, to me. And I am going, on the way, to call at my brother Ambrose's lodgings in Half Moon Street, because he will have read the paper by 10, and he will have drawn the wrong conclusion, and I will not have him discovering the truth from anyone in England but me. Isidora, do not. I was going to say I will come with you. No. No, you will not. If you come with me, it will look like a man defending himself, and any man can defend himself, and no one will believe us. If I go alone, it will look like a wife defending a truth, and that is a different thing, and it is the only thing that will work. You have thought about this. I have thought of nothing else since the paper. It was 10 minutes ago. Yes. I think quickly when I am angry. He laughed. It was a small, broken laugh, and it was the first laugh she had ever heard from him, and she filed it away, carefully, the way she had filed away the pouring of the coffee. Isadora. Yes. When you come home from London. Yes. I would like to speak with you, properly, about everything I have not said in the whole of our marriage. I do not ask for an answer today. I ask only for the appointment. You may have the appointment. Thank you. Caspian. Yes. When I come home from London, you will not sleep in the East Corridor. You will sleep in the room that is yours, and I will sleep in the room that is mine, and the door between them will be unlocked, and neither of us will go through it yet, but it will be unlocked. Do you understand? I understand. Good. She left for London at 8 in the morning, in her own carriage, with her own arms on the panels and the paper folded on the seat beside her, and she did not look back. At the end of the drive, the carriage passed a single rider coming the other way, a man she did not recognize, and she thought for one cold moment that it might be one of Cressida's men, and then she saw that he was only the parish boy bringing the second post, and she breathed out, and she did not cry, and she went. The drawing room of the Dowager Lady Margrave on Berkeley Square had not changed in 40 years, and that, Isadora thought as she sat very upright on the green silk sofa at 10 minutes to 4, was precisely why she had come. Her aunt, 71 years old, and made entirely of lace and iron, had received her at 11, had read the Morning Chronicle aloud to her without a single flicker of expression, had folded the paper, and had said, in the voice she used to settle arguments among royal dukes, "My dear, you will stay with me until this is finished. I will receive today. You will receive with me. We will begin with Lady Dunsford at 4, because Lady Dunsford cannot hold a piece of information in her mouth for longer than the time it takes to cross a room, and by 5 o'clock, every house in Mayfair will have the version we give her. Do you understand? Yes, Aunt. Good. Sit up. You are sitting up already. Sit up more. Isadora had sat up more. She had been to Half Moon Street first. Ambrose had met her at his door in his shirt sleeves, the paper already crumpled in one hand, and had begun, "Rosie, tell me at once that this is," and she had said, "It is not. Sit down. Listen." And she had given him the truth in the fewest words possible, and at the end of it, he had sat very still on his own sofa for a full half-minute, and then said, "Right. What do you need me to do?" She had told him. He had gone at once to his club to begin, with the discreet, brutal efficiency of a younger brother, the quiet correction of certain conversations he knew would be happening there by noon. He had also told her, as she stood at his door, that he had heard already, as of last night, that Lady Vale's creditors had taken fright, and that 2 of her most visible allies had begun to draw back, and that whatever Cressida now did would be done from a weaker seat than she yet knew. It was, Isadora thought, as she drove on to Berkeley Square, the first time in her life that her brother's gossip had been genuinely useful. By 4, her aunt's drawing room was filling. By 1/4 past, it was full. By 1/2 past, it was so crowded that 3 dowagers had to be turned away at the door, which was, Isadora understood, the entire point. The women of London had come in the certain knowledge that the Duchess of Calderhaven would not show her face for a month, and had found her sitting on a green silk sofa in a pale gray afternoon gown, pouring tea and ready to be asked a question. Lady Dunsford asked it. She had to. She had been placed, by the Dowager, in the chair directly opposite the sofa. My dear Duchess, one cannot help but have read. The most distressing piece. Surely there has been a mistake. There has been no mistake, Lady Dunsford. The child exists. He is called Theodore, He has been in my household, at Calderhaven, since Tuesday last. He is my husband's ward. He is the son of my husband's younger brother Edmund, who died at 17 in a boating accident, as many of you will remember. He is 5 years old. He has been ill for most of this past autumn. He is at present asleep in a room overlooking the south lawn of Calderhaven House, and a woman who nursed his father before him is sitting beside his bed. The room did not breathe. I have known of the child, Isadora continued, in the same even tone, for some time. My husband has carried the secret longer, out of a promise made to his brother on the night before that brother's death. A promise that he would not permit the child to be known as the bastard of a 17-year-old boy. It was a promise made to a dying brother by a man of 26. It has been kept for 5 years at considerable cost, and I tell you now that I am proud of the cost, and I am prouder of the keeping. The lady who has written, or caused to be written, the letter that appeared in this morning's paper, is not unknown to any of you. She was the child's mother. She is the child's mother still. She has chosen, for reasons of her own, to imply that the child is my husband's. He is not. I say it here, in this room, to you, and I will say it in any room in London in which it is asked of me, because my husband is bound by the word he gave his brother, and I am not. She set down her teacup. It did not rattle. She had practiced on the carriage ride. The child, she said, is an Ainsworth. He has his uncle's eyes and his father's mouth. He has been brought to Calderhaven because he is old enough now to be in his own home, among people who love him, and not in a quiet house on the Richmond Road, where his mother has visited him perhaps 9 times in 5 years. He will be raised by his uncle and by me. He will carry his father's name. He will not be hidden. He will not be ashamed. And he will not, so long as I am his aunt, spend another hour believing that the Duchess of Calderhaven does not want him. The Dowager Lady Margrave said, very distinctly, "Lady Dunsford, more tea." Lady Dunsford took more tea. A Mrs. Greaves of Hanover Square, who had lost a younger brother at sea, asked a single question with her eyes on her lap, and received a gentle answer. A Lady Ferriby, who had been one of the 3 ladies named by implication in the morning's piece, asked a question that was not quite a question, and received an answer that restored her name in 1 sentence. An elderly Mrs. Thorne, whose first husband had been Edmund Ainsworth's tutor at Eton, asked, with a directness that surprised the room, whether the boy had his father's way of tilting his head when he listened, and Isadora said, truthfully, that he did. Mrs. Thorne nodded once, as if something very old had been settled in her chest, and did not ask anything else. By 5:30 the room had shifted, subtly, in a direction no one in it was yet willing to name. By 6, the first of the tight, written, careful notes of support had begun to arrive. By 8, there were 23. By 10, Isadora had stopped counting. At 10:30, a footman came in with a card on a silver tray. The Dowager read it, raised one gray eyebrow, and passed it across. Lady Cressida Vale. "She is in the hall," the Dowager said. "She is asking to be received." "I will receive her." "You will not." "Aunt." "You will not receive her in my house, my dear. You will see her on the pavement, if you must see her at all. And you will see her with me at the window watching. And if she raises her voice, I will send down 2 of my footmen and a constable. Go." Isadora went. Cressida was standing at the foot of the steps in her furs, and her face, in the lamplight, wasn't the face of a woman who had come to make a scene. It was the face of a woman who had lost, and had come because she did not yet quite believe it. "You went in the night," she said. "I did." "You brought him home." "I did." "You defended my son to a room full of women who will never forgive me." I defended a child, Lady Vale. He will not be told, by me, what you did. He will be told, by me, that he has a mother who loves him as best she can, and that when he is old enough to ask the harder questions, we will answer them truthfully. That is what I will do. I will not do what you did. I will not use him as a knife." Cressida looked at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, she put her gloved hand against her own mouth, and she was crying, briefly, soundlessly, before she mastered it and put her hand down again. "I did love him," she said. "Not your husband, the other one. The boy. I know. No one has ever said that to me. No one has ever said, 'I know.' I'm sorry, Lady Vale. I'm sorry for the boy in the grave, and I'm sorry for the woman you were at 24, and I am sorry that you have spent 5 years on a revenge that was never really against my husband. I am still not going to let you near my ward. Not until he is grown. And then, he will decide. You are not the woman I thought you were, Your Grace. No, I am discovering I am not." "What will you tell him?" Cressida said quietly, "when he is old enough to ask why his mother did not fight for him?" "I will tell him," Isadora said at last, "that his mother was very young when his father died, and very alone, and that what you did afterwards was done by a woman who could not bear her own pain and tried to give it to someone else. I will not tell him you did not love him. I will leave it to him to decide in his own time on the evidence he finds. That is kinder than I deserve. Yes, it is." Cressida turned and walked into the dark of Berkeley Square, and Isadora stood on the steps in the cold until her aunt's butler came down, and, without a word, put a shawl around her shoulders and led her back inside. He came for her 2 days later. She had not sent for him. She had known, with a quiet certainty she did not try to examine, that she would not need to. She had been writing letters in the morning room at Berkeley Square at 11:15, answering a small mountain of notes from women who 2 days ago would not have met her eye in a shop, when her aunt's butler had come in and said, with the entirely straight face of a man who had been in service for 40 years, "His Grace the Duke of Calderhaven is in the hall, madam, and he has brought the child." She stood up so quickly she overturned the inkwell. "Do not apologize," the dowager said from the other chair. "It is an excellent inkwell. It is spilled in an excellent cause. Go down." She went down. They were standing in the black and white tiled hall, her husband and the small boy. And the boy was wearing a new blue coat that was slightly too large for him, and he was holding her husband's hand. And when he saw her, he let go of the hand and took 3 running steps across the tiles and stopped abruptly, because he had not been certain at the last moment whether running was the correct behavior in a great house in London. She knelt and held out her arms. He came into them. She held him for a long moment, with her eyes closed, and over his head she saw Caspian standing in the hall with his hat in both hands, looking at her the way a man looks at the one thing in the world he has not been permitted to believe is his. And she understood that whatever was going to be said between the two of them had in some sense already been said, and that what remained was only the saying aloud. "Theodore," she said against his hair, "did you have a long drive?" "Yes. Uncle let me sit outside with the coachman for the last mile." "Did he?" "It was very cold." "I expect it was." "Your Grace." "Yes. Mistress Halloran put a ribbon in my trunk for you. She said you would understand." He took from his coat pocket a small folded square of green ribbon. Isadora took it. She did not, for a moment, understand, and then she did. It was the ribbon the boy had been wearing around his wrist the night they had fetched him from Richmond. He had not wanted to take it off. Caspian had tied it, at 3 in the morning, in a careful small bow, and had told him that he could keep it until he was safe home. He was, evidently, safe home. She put the ribbon in the pocket of her gown. "Thank you, Theodore. Will you go with Harris, please? My aunt has something for you in the library." "Yes, Your Grace. When you are more at ease with me, you might try calling me Aunt Isadora." He considered this gravely. "Yes, Aunt Isadora." The butler took him away. She and Caspian were left in the hall. "He has not stopped talking about you," Caspian said, "since the morning you left. He has asked 3 times a day when you were coming home. I have told him each time that I do not know, because I did not know, and I did not wish to lie to him." "I'm coming home today." "Yes. I'm coming home with you today, in your carriage, in full view of Berkeley Square, because I want every window on this square to see me get into your carriage, with you and with him, and to draw their own conclusions, and I want those conclusions to be correct." "Yes. Caspian." "Yes. You said at Calderhaven that you wished to speak with me, about everything you had not said." "Yes. Speak." He set down his hat on the hall table. He looked, for a moment, like a man preparing for a duel, and then he looked, for a moment, like a man who had been preparing for it for a very long time. "I fell in love with you," he said, "on the morning of the 4th day of our marriage. I can tell you the hour. It was 7:15. I can tell you what you were wearing. It was a pale blue morning gown with a cream shawl that was too light for the hour because the fire in the breakfast room had gone out in the night, and no one had told you. I can tell you what you said. You said to the footman, very quietly, that he wasn't to wake the housekeeper, because the woman had been up with a sick child in the village until 2, and that you would manage the fire yourself. You said it in the voice of a person who had not expected anyone to hear her, and I heard her, and I stood in the doorway for what I believe was the longest minute of my life, and I watched my wife kneel in a pale blue gown at a cold grate, and lay a fire with her own hands so that a housekeeper she had met twice could sleep another hour. And I thought, with a kind of terror I did not yet have a word for, that I had married a woman whose kindness was the unpaid kind, the kind given to people who would never be able to repay her, and I had not known it, and I had been cold to her for 3 days, and I did not yet know what to do with the information that I had been wrong. She did not speak. I have never told you, and I have never told anyone, because I had been called away on the wedding night, on an errand I was not permitted to explain, and I had come home the next morning to find you already knew, somehow, where I had been, or at least where you had been told I had been, and I saw in your face that you had made a decision about me, and I understood that nothing I could say in that moment would unmake the decision, and I chose to let you have it. I chose to let you believe the worst of me, because the worst of me was survivable for you, and the truth wasn't mine to give. I have been choosing it every morning since. I was wrong. I was wrong on the first morning, and I have been wrong on every morning since. And I have loved you every morning since. And I have been ashamed of loving you every morning since, because a man who permits his wife to hate him for 2 years and 4 months has no right to the word. He paused. His hand, she saw, had closed upon the brim of his hat. "There are other mornings," he said. "I can tell you about a morning in the first summer when you found a lame fox in the East Avenue and made the gamekeeper carry it home in a basket rather than destroy it. And I watched you from a window you did not know was open, and I did not come down. I can tell you about a night in October when you sang very badly in the East drawing room, because you thought yourself alone, and I stood in the corridor outside and listened to the end of it. I can tell you about an afternoon in March when a tenant's child came to the back door with a fever, and you spent 4 hours in the kitchen with a doctor you had sent for at your own expense, and walked back across the park in the rain, and I saw you from the library window, and poured myself a brandy, and did not drink it, and I wrote you a letter I did not send. I can tell you, if you wish, every hour of these 2 years and 4 months in which I have, by act of will, refused myself the privilege of being your husband. I have been keeping a ledger in my head. I had hoped one day to present it to you. I had hoped one day to pay it. I do not ask you to love me back today. I do not ask it at all. I ask you to let me begin our marriage on the day you walk into Calderhaven House with me and with Theodore. I ask you to let me pour your coffee in the morning, and to let me ride with you in the afternoon, and to let me sit in the library with you in the evening, without the door between our rooms being locked. And I ask that you let me, at some point I do not name, earn back the long years. I will not hurry you. I will not ask anything of you. I will only be there. I will be the man you can see out of the corner of your eye, every time you turn your head, for as long as you wish me there. That is all. That is the whole of what I ask. She walked the length of the hall to him. She stopped a single step away. She put her hand, flat, against the front of his coat, over the place where his heart was, exactly as she had done in the library at Calderhaven. Caspian? Yes. I have loved you since the afternoon you told me about the child. I have loved you, in a thinner way, for longer than that. There was a night in the second winter when I came down too early for dinner and found you in the library reading a letter, and I saw the letter was from the woman in Richmond, and I misread every word of what was on your face, and I left the room before you knew I had come in, and I cried for an hour in my dressing room. I believed that night that you were writing to your mistress. I know now you were writing to a child. There was a morning, too, in the first spring, when a groom brought you a lame horse, and you spent half an hour in the stable with him, working over the animal's foot, and you came back to the house with straw in your hair and your hands black, and I saw you from my window, and I did not call out to you, because I did not yet know what I was going to do with a husband who stood in a stable for half an hour for a horse that was not even his. I have loved you in some buried way, since that morning and since that night, although I did not have the courage to call it love until the afternoon in the library. I did not say so then, because I was not yet certain I could be trusted with the saying. I am certain now. You do not need to earn me back. You need to come home with me and eat supper, and you need to help Theodore learn the names of the horses, and you need to walk into the House of Lords next Tuesday and sit in your seat as if nothing has happened, because nothing has happened, except that a boy has come home to his uncle and his aunt, and a woman has remembered the name of her husband. He lowered his forehead to hers. He did not kiss her. It was not the place. It was a hall in Berkeley Square at 11:45 with a butler down the corridor and a dowager up the stairs, and a 5-year-old boy in a library eating more cake than he had ever been permitted at one sitting. He did not kiss her. He only stayed there, with his forehead against hers, for as long as they could afford. And then he straightened, and he picked up his hat, and he offered her his arm, and they went out onto the steps of Berkeley Square in full view of every window and every footman and every passing carriage, and they got into his carriage together, with the boy between them, and they went home. It took London 6 weeks to decide. The Morning Chronicle printed on the 5th day, a small correction at the bottom of the 3rd page. The Gazette printed on the 7th a fuller piece by a gentleman who had known the Ainsworth brothers at Eton, and had thought it his duty to set certain matters right. By the end of the month, 3 separate hostesses had invited the Duchess of Calderhaven to supper, and the Duchess had gone to each, and the Duke had gone with her, and the Duke's ward had, on one carefully chosen afternoon, been introduced, briefly, at the Lindgate family's own drawing room, to a small, curated circle of women whose approval, once given, could not be withdrawn. The Lindgate family, it turned out, were a very useful thing to have behind one. Ambrose, who had been in certain drawing rooms on certain crucial evenings before his sister arrived in them, became that same month the kind of young man it was suddenly fashionable to invite, and he was not, in the end, ruined by anyone. Lady Cressida Vale left for the continent at the beginning of Lent. She wrote a single letter from Calais to the Duchess of Calderhaven. It was not long. It said, in its entirety, "You were right about the revenge. I hope the boy is well." See, Isadora answered it. She kept a copy of her answer in the drawer of her writing desk, beside the original sealed letter and the small folded child's note, because she had decided, quietly, that one day when Theodore was old enough, she would show him all three, in order, so that he should know exactly how he had come into his own house. The Duke of Calderhaven, in the first week of December, took his seat in the House of Lords for the first time in 2 years. He sat through a debate on the Corn Laws, said nothing, voted once, and came home. He did the same thing the following Tuesday. By the third Tuesday, 3 gentlemen had sought him out in the lobby to ask his opinion on a private matter. He gave it, truthfully and briefly, and came home. He came home every evening. That was, Isadora thought, the part of it that still, 2 years on, made her chest tight when she thought of it. Theodore learned to ride in the spring. He was put first on the old mare, who was, as his uncle had promised, very patient, and then on a stout gray pony of his own, and by the following autumn he could sit a trot as neatly as any boy in the county. He learned the names of every servant in the house, and remembered them, and greeted each by name each morning. He learned to read better than he had been reading, and then to read well, and then to read aloud at the dinner table, to his aunt's visible delight, from whichever book his uncle had chosen for him that week. He asked, at 7, the first of the harder questions. He was answered, truthfully and briefly, by the 2 people who had promised each other they would always answer him truthfully and briefly. He did not ask again for some months. When he did, he asked more. He was answered more. In this way, the story of his life was laid out in front of him, not all at once, but in the order in which he could bear it, and at no point was he ever permitted to believe that he had been unwanted. The Duke and Duchess of Calderhaven were reported, by close observers of such matters, to have become unexpectedly devoted in their middle marriage. They were seen to walk out together most afternoons, to sit together most evenings, and at one notable supper at the close of the London season, to laugh simultaneously at something no one else at the table had found amusing, and it was observed, quite widely, that the Duke had a surprisingly pleasant laugh. On the eve of the 2nd anniversary of the Harrowgate ball, 2 years to the day since Lady Cressida Vale had said, "Choose her or me," in front of 140 people, Isadora came down the long flagstone corridor at Calderhaven House in a plain gray gown, and found her husband waiting for her at the door of the library. "Madam," he said gravely, "I believe this next dance is mine." "There is no dance, Your Grace. There is no orchestra. A small deficiency. Come." There was, it turned out, an orchestra of precisely 1. Theodore, at 7½, had been practicing very secretly on the pianoforte for a fortnight, and had been taught, by a governess sworn to silence, the opening bars of the waltz that had been played, or nearly played, at Harrowgate House 2 years earlier. He played it badly. He played it with great concentration, and with his tongue slightly out. He played it beautifully. They danced in the library at Calderhaven House, her husband and herself, with a small boy playing the pianoforte in the corner, and the fire burning low, and no one else in the world knowing or caring. Halfway through the second phrase, Caspian bent his head and said, against her temple. 2 years ago tonight, I walked across a ballroom without looking at her, and I thought I was choosing you. I have learned since that it was not a choice. It was the first time I have ever, in the whole of my life, done a thing because I could not do otherwise. What was it then, if not a choice? It was recognition. I do not know a better word for it. It was the moment I understood whose hand I had been holding for the whole of our marriage, without once allowing myself to feel it. And now I feel it. She laid her cheek against his. Caspian. Yes, thank you for choosing me. Isadora. Yes, thank you for letting me. At the pianoforte, Theodore finished the piece. He looked up anxiously to see whether he had done well. His uncle released his aunt with a small bow, crossed the room, put his hand on the boy's dark head and said, "Excellently, Theodore. You will play it for us every year." Every year? Every year. On this night. For as long as there is a pianoforte in this house. Yes, uncle. Good man. And that was how it was done, at Calderhaven, from that night forward. On the eve of the anniversary of the Harrogate Ball, every year, a small family in the library, one old waltz, badly played, a man and a woman dancing, a boy at the instrument growing taller each year, and in time a second child, and in time a third, and in time a pianoforte of their own, and a library that was never again, in any of their lives, a cold room. Some storms, it turned out, arrived in the shape of an ultimatum across a crowded ballroom. Some choices were made not in the moment of their making, but in the long, slow years of keeping them, and some loves, the ones that had been there all along, buried under honor and silence, and a brother's dying word, needed only one woman brave enough to walk across a hall and put her hand over the place where a man's heart was, and to keep it there until he remembered that it was beating. Thank you for staying with Isadora and Caspian and Theodore until the very end. Their story began with a question shouted across a ballroom, and it ended with a waltz played by a child in a quiet country library, and in between it was carried, always, by the choices of the woman who refused to be invisible and the man who finally learned to be seen. If this story has moved you, please take a moment now to tap subscribe and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting. More impossible nights. More long silences broken. More hands laid, quietly and without ceremony, over the place where a heart has been waiting to be found. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories are told.